Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 9th of August, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. However you like to do that, that's a good way to start. And we offer some other suggestions for you. The Alaska Weather Information line is always on. A little blip last night, but that came right back after people, reset the box a little bit for you. 1-800-472-0391. You can always find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. Also, if you want to localize your experience right from the start, weather.gov/Fairbanks/Anchorage or /Juneau, as well as the AAWU, the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. Or make sure you check out weather.gov/tsunami and bookmark some of the information there so you can find the information you're looking for the next time we get a little bit of a shake, especially if it's closer to the coastline. Here's a look at some of the headlines that I thought were important to share with you tonight. The first of several cold waves is already on the North Slope. The front passed Barrow, and if you're in Barrow, you probably noticed the big difference once that came ashore there. North winds somewhat close to the coast. But the next wave, with two L's there for will, it's not an abbreviation for something, the next wave will bring north winds and cold, much more cold, to more parts of the west coast and areas into the Bering Sea for sure. It's also going to make it into the Brooks Range. Snow levels could drop to 7,000 feet on Friday in the Brooks Range and then eventually to the surface by Saturday afternoon. So 7,000 feet is not a big deal to the Brooks Range, but the surface certainly is. And so if you're planning to drive on the Dalton Highway, you'll want to keep an eye on the forecast for sure, as there could be several inches of snow, maybe as much as 6 to 8 in some cases. So again, keep an eye on the forecast in the Brooks Range and the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. The levels will be a little bit higher in those regions. The Chukchi Coast, you're also going to be looking at north winds 20 to 35 miles per hour developing and into Kotzebue Sound. Now, for some places, that could bring seas up to 10 to 12 feet. So keep your eye on that. And high surf advisories may be a possibility as we get toward the end of the weekend into the weekend because of all of these changes. In the meantime, we're still watching the flooding around the Tetlin Road area. A flood advisory continues for that region. No major change in that water level for now. So a flood advisory will continue for the foreseeable future. As we look at fire danger across the region, we've seen a little bit of the extreme levels drop off across the Yukon Flats and the headwaters of the Yukon there. Conditions continue to improve across the eastern interior and the upper Yukon Valley, as well as areas just north of the Alaska Range. The Copper River Basin, not much of a change from yesterday. Still looking at some drier levels. However, as we've been talking about for days now, the moisture coming in off the Pacific will be pushing its way in and has been throughout the daytime today. So rain is certainly going to spread out across many of those drier places. And with time, we should see that fire danger abate. Don't expect to see a whole lot of changes across west or southwestern Alaska toward drier conditions in the near future. And as many of you know, August is the wettest month for all of Alaska if you take it in total there. So fire danger is certainly going to gradually decline, maybe a little bit slower for some of those drier locations, but we're certainly moving in that direction for sure. Now, as you look up across the north and west, you can see a lot of that kind of a rough texture to the visible satellite. That is the cold front working its way southward and convection or bubbling air working along that boundary as it's being literally shoved upward like a snowplow would to snow. Considering that cold air is moving southward there, we've got a lot of upward moving air here, and there'll certainly be some periods of rainfall. Out ahead of that, I haven't seen a whole lot of thunder and lightning. Saw a few strikes yesterday, but more of an active system is a low pressure system that's working through the Bristol Bay region. There has been some lightning strikes in that area throughout the afternoon. Here's a look at the infrared picture, and as you look a little bit further north and west, keep your eyes focused on what you see here across the Siberian coast and out of the Arctic Ocean. That northerly movement of the air is what we're watching there, and the cold front itself lingering right here across the Bering Strait and into eastern Siberia. Remember, there's a second wave behind that, and it's that second push that's really going to bring in that stronger northerly flow and the more abundant cold air. So this is just kind of a setting the stage motion here, as it were, with most of the moisture moving in from the south through many parts of the interior and southwest. We've got a lot of moisture moving up ahead of that. And so as that cold front drops southward, it's going to have a lot to work with as far as moisture to wring out of the atmosphere, or perhaps even snow to create across the Brooks Range as we go through your Wednesday. One more time, and you'll notice that our friends in southeast, from Ketchikan all the way to Haines and Skagway and Yakutat, enjoying a generally dry, sunny, mostly sunny kind of day across the region. No sign of precipitation just yet, but things will be changing as the moisture continues to creep eastward ever so slightly. And then as we get the cold front dropping southward, a lot of that will be pushed eastward. And so eventually a return to clouds and rain will be in your forecast. High pressure right now across the Chukchi Sea at 1,020 millibars, pushing the leading edge of colder air southward. This is just that preliminary case. Out across Bristol Bay, a chance for some showers and thunderstorms through the remainder of the afternoon. Low pressure sitting across the Alaska Peninsula is working a front north and east ever so slightly, but here's your protection for southeast. High pressure at 1,017 millibars continues to bring fairly mild weather to the Copper River Basin. In fact, Eagle today made it well into the 80s, but that dry air that's in place that allowed that sunshine to occur also meant Gulkana was sitting in the mid-30s overnight this morning. So a pretty big stretch in temperatures for you today. Low pressure sitting very close to Eagle by tonight at 1,007 millibars. Here's the front draping its way across the Brooks Range. I don't have snow painted there for you tonight. That's not the current thinking for most cases. As we look across the lower and middle Yukon and the upper Kuskokwim all the way out toward the coast and south central, periods of rain will be in the forecast. Southeast are doing fine. You may see some fog out toward the outer coast, and there's a chance for some heavier rainfall outside of Prince William Sound and into parts of the southern Chugach Range. Now, look up to the north and west, and you can see that next weather wave getting its act together. High pressure sitting across the western Bering, locking in low areas of stratus and certainly some fog, and that's going to help channel that low pressure system closer to the Chukchi coast by Thursday afternoon. Low pressure from the last weather system will sit across the eastern Brooks Range by Thursday, and watch for some widely scattered showers and thunderstorms to develop across the central and northern interior especially. High pressure sitting across the Prince William Sound region, still working moisture northward across the west coast and into the central interior and south central, and still working to keep southeast fairly clear and dry and mild through your Thursday. The high pressure system across the Bering is also working that cold southward. So all of these systems are working in tandem to allow the Arctic to flex its muscles a little bit, take a stretch, and say, yeah, it's about time for colder air to return to Alaska. So here's Friday. Low pressure is just north of Point Barrow there at 993 millibars and deepening. The north winds should kick in as we get into Thursday night and Friday. You'll certainly notice that with snow and rain mixed with snow along and just north of the Chukchi Sea coast and pushing its way toward Kotzebue Sound. So your normal places that suffer a little bit when north winds kick up like this, 20 to 35 miles per hour along the Chukchi coast and possibly into Kotzebue Sound and the Baldwin Peninsula, you need to start thinking about what that means for your community there. So keep in mind that high surf may be an issue for you, and seas of 10 to 12 feet offshore may be an issue, as well as waves up to 6 to 8 feet. So watch for that to develop as we head into Friday, Saturday, and maybe diminishing by Sunday there. So some changes, not to mention the drop in temperatures. It will be much colder. Look for showers across the eastern and central interior and across the Kenai Peninsula as the main core of low pressure scoots across the northern Gulf. The rain and the clouds start to make their way back into southeastern Alaska. There may be some places that still sneak out with a drier day. Ketchikan, perhaps Snider, but the outer coast looks to start to see a return to clouds and wet weather. The front will continue dropping southward on Sunday and eventually bring some of that cold weather, it looks like, toward the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula and many more around Bristol Bay as well. So prepare for changing weather as we head into the weekend for the west coast and the chain. A lot of this cold will still be trying to work its way southward toward south central as well. Not quite as cold as it is when it reaches the coast up north, but certainly a noticeable change. Temperatures today, let's go back to where we are. 60s and 70s across southeast. Look at this, southern southeast in the mid-70s. Same goes for Haines, Skagway, and Juneau. Boy, what a mild day today. Mid-60s across the outer coast of Skagway. Prince William Sound, 60s from Whittier all the way to Valdez and Cordova. 69 as you get up toward Talkeetna. Beautiful day there. 60 around Kenai. As you get into the interior, temperatures there, we're approaching the 80-degree mark again for The Golden Heart City as well. Tanana, 85 in Eagle, 80 around Northway, is 76 around Fort Yukon. The Brooks Range anywhere from the mid to upper 60s around Arctic Village to AKwx Pass. And then here's the cold front around the Chukchi Coast, 30s and 40s there. A remarkable difference, 55 for Kaktovik and 40s and 50s for Kotzebue Sound. 61 in Nome, 64 for Unalakleet. Galena was 61 degrees, 71 in McGrath, 68 degrees as well for areas around Bethel. St. Lawrence Island, you had 53. You'll see some of those north winds eventually. 50s and 60s for Bristol Bay, 54 in Kodiak, and 50s for the Chain and most of the Alaska Peninsula with St. Paul at 54. Overnight lows stay mild across the Yukon Valley in the 50s, 50 degrees for Nome, 39 in Barrow, South Central back in the mid-50s, Southeast in the lower to mid-50s, and 40s for the Pribilofs and the Chain. With highs tomorrow, still warm for the Yukon Flats as well as Northway and Eagle. The middle Tanana Valley starts to cool off just a bit, and you can see 40s and 50s continue for the North Slope and Nome near 60 degrees as well as most of the south and west coast, mid-60s there. This is all the warm before the storm and that next push of colder air. South Central again, still fairly mild. Southeast in the upper 60s and even lower 70s again for your Thursday. Flying weather, watch for changes across the Bering Sea and the north and west coast and the Brooks Range. IFR conditions will be hit and miss up north as we go through the morning hours, and southeast we're looking at fog, so watch for visibility concerns there through the morning. That should improve by the afternoon. Convection fires up in the afternoon ahead of that cold front coming into the Chukchi Coast by late afternoon and evening. You'll see IFR conditions trending south and east as we get into the afternoon and evening, and certainly again on Friday, and IFR taking over most of what you see across the western and central Bering. Here's your pass conditions. Watch for VFR conditions by the afternoon for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, so that a MVFR start is certainly possible in the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through a large part of the day. Watch for rain and poor visibility. Low decks for sure around Rainy Pass, and showers and thunderstorms could develop in the region during the afternoon. Same goes for Windy Pass tomorrow. Convection a little bit more of a possibility there as you move north and east. Isabel Pass, MVFR conditions by the afternoon. Watch for rain in the region, and Mentasta Pass right now looks to be pretty warm. VFR conditions in that region and no major threats there. Tanita Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions and showers and thunderstorms possible. IFR in the morning for Portage Pass with some improvement by the day, but heavy rain will be in the region. And Chilcoot and White Pass expected to be A-OK, so enjoy the flight there. Freezing levels show a cool pool of air out across the western Gulf and the southern Bering Sea, but I think the big story is the 4,000-foot freezing line that's just north of Point Barrow tomorrow morning, and what comes behind that is a significant drop heading for the Chukchi Coast by Friday and Saturday morning. So keep your eye on the northwest as we go through the next several days. In the meantime, southeast looking at levels between 12 and 14,000 feet, most of the interior between 8 and 12,000, and out across the chain between 8 and 10,000 feet in the morning. Icing potential is changing for sure. Up north, you can see the levels have been dropping as far as the last map goes, but for tomorrow anyway, the Brooks Range looking at freezing levels and icing potential between about 7 and 10,000 feet and above. Some of the more significant areas there will be passing over the Brooks Range and the Seward Peninsula, as well as areas over southwest Alaska and the Gulf, but most of this is pretty high up there for general aviation, so above 10,000 feet means most of you can fly underneath and be just fine. The jet stream shows a very strong punch coming out of the Arctic at 110 knots there. It looks like that will be enough to push that colder air southward into the Bering as we go through the next few days. However, we still have high pressure across the Pacific Northwest and eastern Alaska. What that means is this is holding some of that back. The question is, will it be strong enough? And right now, we think no, that cold air waits for no man, and that will be pushing southward as the season is again, stretching its muscles just a little bit. West and northwesterlies are coming into the Chukchi Coast, anywhere from 10 to 45 knots there. The strongest wind still well offshore. Broad southerly flow over southeast, 15 to 25. Low pressure over Bristol Bay, more of an offshore component right now off the western Alaska range at 15 to 20. At 3,000 feet, a similar pattern. Lighter winds across the central and eastern Gulf, 10 to 20 there. Light westerlies across the interior, 10 to 15. And there's our southwesterly flow for the Chukchi Coast at 25 to 35 knots with northerly winds already working through the western Bering, 10 to 20. Watch for turbulence across the north below 4,000 feet. Some stronger areas of turbulence perhaps across areas near Point Hope to Point Lay, and then out across Bristol Bay below 6,000 feet, below 4,000 feet for some chop around the Pribilofs and the central and western chain. Everywhere else, A-OK for tomorrow. Watch for changes into the weekend. That's your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
fire safety goal of landscaping and maintenance is very simple. Reduce the amount of fuel immediately surrounding your home. However, this doesn't mean your landscape has to be barren. Some plants are more fire resistant than others. One of the most important things any wildland homeowner can do is to create a safety zone or fire break around the house using these fire-resistant plants.
And there was still some brush that was potentially close enough that could have caused my house to go up if I hadn't taken that out. So it's just keeping that perimeter wide and keeping it free and the cheatgrass down very, very low, I think, is what saved my home. It gave the firefighters of the perimeter that they needed to get up in here and even do whatever defense they could do to help, you know, any potential engagement with the fire. Because at least they had some room to work.
Your safety zone can consist of numerous varieties of plants, including grasses, border plantings, flowers, and vegetables. Check with your local fire officials about the best species for your area. In most areas, a safety zone should be cleared away from your home for a distance of not less than 30 feet. As the slope of the lot increases, additional clearance as far out as 100 feet may be necessary. Clearance also depends on vegetative conditions that provide ladder fuels that enable fire to climb into trees. Trees and shrubs are fine as long as dead or low-hanging branches are removed and the height of ground vegetation is controlled. Be sure to remove all tree limbs around your chimney, as well as any dead branches that may hang over the roof. Accumulated leaves, needles, and other dead vegetation should also be removed. Beyond 100 feet from the house, dead wood and older trees should be removed or thinned. Consult with your local fire officials for specific guidelines appropriate for your location. Keep an eye on any limbs that may come in contact with power lines. If you're not equipped to trim them yourself, call the power company and let them know about the hazard. When it comes to routine maintenance, remember to sweep your gutters, eaves, and roof on a regular basis, especially during the hot, dry weather of the fire season. Tender, dry needles and leaves are a fire waiting to happen. Although it's very convenient to stack firewood under the porch or under the eaves, it's not in your best interest to do so. To say the least, you're inviting trouble. Stack your firewood well away from anything that's combustible, including fences and outbuildings. Outdoor incinerators or burning barrels for household trash are illegal in many areas because they generate wind-blown sparks. If they are allowed, a permit is usually required, so you need to check with your local fire protection agency about laws and ordinances. Your home should have at least 2 ground-level doors as safety exits in case of fire. And each room should have at least 2 means of escape, including a door and a window leading to the outside. This is especially true in bedrooms. Install as many smoke detectors as local regulations require, and ask your fire officials to help you plan and rehearse a home fire escape drill. Regular home fire drills can save your family in an emergency. If you do all these things, especially clearing the safety zone around your house and building a fire-safe roof, you have an excellent chance of protecting your home and family against wildfire. But can these simple precautions really yield such dramatic results? Yes. In fact, the real-life experiences of those who have done these things seem just short of miraculous.
Well, each year I'd taken an axe and cut out the brush and was just cutting that out from around the house in order to make it easy to take the cheatgrass out with a weed eater, a heavy-duty weed eater. And then every year I just kept increasing that distance out from around the house, never knowing how much was going to be enough. You've got to keep that brush clear away from your home so that the fire doesn't have any chance to get up against the side of your house.
The smoke seemed to build up quite a bit, and then I noticed about 10 fire engines coming up the street, and I ran out with the children and said, what should I do? And they said, as quickly as possible, evacuate the house. I looked down at the house, and there were about 200-foot flames almost surrounding the house, and I was sure at that time that the house was gone. A few months before the fire, we heard that you should make sure the sagebrush is cleared away from the house, and he just thought, well, we might start doing that in case there was a fire.
This is beautiful country. It's a privilege and a pleasure to live here. And with that comes a responsibility not only to protect our own property and the safety of our neighbors, but to preserve the resources, the wildlife, and the natural beauty that belong to everyone. Thank you for taking time to watch this program. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call your local fire department, Wildland Fire Agency, or state forester. Your efforts do make a difference.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge. Not a whole lot of change from what we were looking at yesterday, but notice the pack ice here. We got a little bit better view of that today, and concentrations above 80% still linger up north. We are going to get some north winds, as you saw on the surface charts a while ago, so there could be more ice pushed closer to the coast, but the good news is sea surface temperatures remain fairly warm along the coast, so any low concentration ice moving southward closer to those warmer waters will likely undergo a lot of melting as well. There's still some lower concentration brash ice just north and west of Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Make sure you get the latest information anytime before you head out. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On to southeast, pleasant weather continues, sunshine, dry weather, warm temperatures, and light winds across the region with small seas. Outer coast conditions anywhere from 10 to 15 knots. A little bit more variable in the afternoon with the strongest winds outside of the Dixon entrance from the north and west at 15 in the morning, and then becoming light and variable in the afternoon. Look for seas on the outer coast 3 to 4 feet. On the inside, not a lot of change for your Friday. South winds coming up the inner channels 10 to 15 knots, 3-foot seas in some areas around the Lynn Canal and the Clarence Strait, even smaller seas in Stevens Passage. Across the outer coast, though, watch for southeasterlies to come up 20 to 25 with 4 to as high as 6-foot seas outside of Icy Cape and Yakutat for your Friday. For south central, light and variable winds across Cook Inlet, 2 to 3-foot seas as you head down through the Barrens. Southeasterlies developing east of Kodiak Island, and 5 to 6-foot seas across the north and western Gulf, and easterlies inside of Prince William Sound with a 3-foot sea there. Northeasterlies develop for Friday. A north and easterly wind coming down the north and western Gulf there, about 15 knots or so. Look for 4 to 5-foot seas, and a light and variable flow from Cook Inlet all the way to Shelikof Strait with 2 to 3-foot seas on your Friday. For southwest and the Alaska Peninsula as well as Bristol Bay, a 25-knot wind there inside the bay, 5-foot seas expected on that easterly flow. A south and westerly wind across the Pacific coast, 6 to 7-foot seas there, and 15-knot winds down the Bering Sea coast with a 4-foot sea. Becoming more light and variable on Friday, a weak south wind blowing through the bay with a 2-foot sea. More of a west and variable flow at times across the Pacific coast, 5-foot seas there. Westerly flow just south of King Cove and Sand Point up to 15 knots. For the Aleutians, you'll see the effects of that northerly push as we go through the maps here. Look for a westerly flow across the eastern chain up to 20 knots, 4 to 6 foot seas, and north and easterly winds here, all wrapping around high pressure as well out across the western Bering. 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. Now, as we get into Friday, we'll start to see a little bit more of a northerly nudge there. High pressure still in command, but that front is working its way southward. And as we get into Saturday, there's really nothing much to keep that cold air from dropping even further southward based on the flow we have already. So 15 to 20 knots in all areas for Friday. Winds and seas remain somewhat gentle, 4 to 6 foot seas in all regions. And again, winds around 15 to 20 out of the north. For Thursday across the west coast, northerlies 15 knots with a 4 foot sea. North and easterly winds across the west and southwest coast. A stronger offshore flow there around the Kuskokwim Delta with a 4 foot sea. And northerlies for St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George with 4 to 5 foot seas there on Thursday. We get a stronger northerly wind over St. Lawrence Island and out of the Bering Strait with an 8 foot sea on Friday, but we still have a west, even a southwesterly flow feeding into areas ahead of that cold front working through Norton Sound. Look for that flow to come up to 20 knots from the southwest, 3 to 5 foot seas, and westerlies around St. Paul and St. George. Here is the north slope now. North and westerlies or southwesterlies across the Chukchi Coast, 20 to 30 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas on Thursday. Light winds and smaller seas across the Beaufort, but they're coming up as well. For Friday, a really strong northerly flow coming down the Chukchi Coast with seas up to 11 feet. Watch for high surf conditions as well as we get into the weekend. And south and westerly winds for the Beaufort, 15 to 25 with 5 to as high as 8 foot seas around Point Barrow for Friday. Again, monitor conditions across the northwest coast as we go into the weekend. Here's a look at the surface charts one more time. The first wave of colder air is dropping southward. Rain out ahead of that. Some of that could be heavy at times around Prince William Sound. As this wave has moved out of the region, showers and thunderstorms may develop for the interior. Periods of rain continue for south central and southwest for your Thursday. Dry weather in southeast. The next wave moves southward across the northwest coast, bringing snow levels down to the surface across the central Brooks Range. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.